This man had lived a wild and sinful life, convinced he'd continue down that path until the end of his days. But everything changed when he came face to face with death. At the exact moment his soul left his body, God revealed something unexpected, massive. Earthquakes that are about to strike the United States. What exactly did he witness? Stay with us until the end, because this isn't just a near-death experience, it's a divine warning, particularly for those living in the US or near high-risk areas without even knowing it. Have you felt a stirring in your heart, a subtle nudge, or an unshakable question? If so, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. It could be your soul trying to speak, and your words might offer hope to someone else seeking light in the darkness. At Eternal Bible Stories, our mission is to share real-life testimonies that awaken faith, ignite hope, and remind the world that God is still at work. If you believe in this mission, like and subscribe to help us continue spreading these messages. Now, listen to his story. My name is Torres. I'm 56 years old, from Bakersfield, California, where I've spent most of my life working as a warehouse laborer. I've never written a book, never taught anyone, and I didn't have strong faith. I used to be short-tempered, selfish, and rude. I smoked, drank, stayed up all night playing video games, and regularly gambled on sports. But something happened at the end of 2022 that completely turned my life upside down. After a near-death experience caused by septic shock, I faced death head-on and saw things I never imagined were possible. That experience changed me in ways I still can't fully explain. I wasn't a vegetarian before, but now I am. The foods I used to crave no longer appeal to me, and things I once disliked have become favorites. It's strange. This experience didn't just alter my diet, it completely reshaped my personality. I hardly recognize the person I used to be, though on occasion, I can still feel traces of my old self trying to resurface. The vision I had last week about a catastrophic earthquake hitting Los Angeles ties back to the profound changes I experienced after my near-death experience. Today, I'm ready to share the full story of that journey with you. It all began so uneventfully that no one, including myself, could have predicted the disaster looming ahead. It was just an ordinary evening on November 11th, 2022, following another draining day at work. I arrived home around 6 p.m., grabbed some leftover soup from the fridge, and settled down to watch a few videos to unwind. The exhaustion I felt seemed like a typical result of late nights and work stress catching up to me. Little did I know this was the prelude to something far more serious. By 8 p.m., I decided to turn in early, hoping a good night's rest would recharge me. But instead of waking up refreshed the next day, I was abruptly jolted awake around 3 or 4 a.m. by an excruciating abdominal pain that left me unable to stay still. The pain wasn't just sharp, it felt as though some invisible force was squeezing my insides relentlessly. Moments later, I began vomiting uncontrollably. Assuming it could be food poisoning or a stomach bug, I tried to rest and hoped it would pass. However, my condition spiraled downward by the minute. By early morning, around 6 or 7 a.m., I couldn't keep anything down, not even a sip of water. Each attempt to drink was met with immediate vomiting. My body started to tremble from dehydration. Cold sweat drenched my face, and I felt dizzy, as if I were on the verge of fainting. At that moment, I knew something was seriously wrong. Desperate and frightened, I called out to my roommate downstairs. My voice was so faint and shaky that I barely recognized it myself. "Hey, I'm not sure what's happening, but I feel awful. Can you keep an eye on me? I don't know if this is just the flu or something worse." She brought me a glass of water, but once again, I couldn't keep it down. After that brief conversation, I managed to crawl back to my bed, writhing in pain that had now radiated beyond my abdomen to my back, chest, and sides. It felt like my entire body was on fire, burning me from the inside out. I lay there unable to sleep, unable to eat, waiting for something, either some kind of relief or a clear sign of what to do next. But by around 2 p.m. that day, my body began showing even stranger symptoms. I felt tightness in my chest. My breathing became labored. My head spun so badly, I thought I might pass out. Every step made my heart pound like it would explode inside. My ribcage. That was the moment I knew. If I didn't act fast, I might not make it through the night. I understood now, this wasn't a typical illness. This was the moment I had to seek emergency help, or accept the possibility that I might never Wake up again. By around 2 p.m. that day, I knew I couldn't just lie there and wait any longer. The chest pain had started to spread, and my breathing grew heavier, like an invisible hand was pressing down on my ribcage, squeezing out the last bit of air from my lungs. Cold sweat drenched me. My heart was beating erratically, and my vision started to blur. I had to do something. I had to call for help. I forced myself to sit up and stagger downstairs, each step feeling like I was carrying a mountain on my back. But as I approached the sofa, a wave of dizziness hit me so hard I collapsed. I slumped into the couch, my heart pounding wildly like it was trying to scream for help before giving out. I had no strength left to shout. My only hope was that I could somehow use my phone to call emergency services. With a trembling hand, I pulled out my phone and used my weak voice to activate the voice control feature, struggling to articulate each word. Call emergency. I heard the phone connect, and voices respond from the dispatch center. I managed to whisper a few words before everything faded, but I knew they had tracked my location. I lay there alone in the quiet room, counting the seconds, as if that was the only thing left I could control. About 3 minutes later, I heard the faint sound of ambulance sirens in the distance. But in that moment, 3 minutes felt like 3 years. Every second was a battle between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion. I remember mumbling in my head like a silent plea, "Please don't let me die. Lord, please don't let me die like this." When the paramedics entered the house, I could barely speak. They quickly began checking my vital signs, attaching the EKG and other monitoring devices. I heard one of them say, "He's having a heart attack," a sentence that sounded simple, yet it crushed any last bit of hope I had. This wasn't fatigue or stomach pain anymore. This was my heart shutting down. They lifted me onto a stretcher and rushed me to the ambulance to head to the nearest hospital. But ironically, although we were only about 5 miles away, we got stuck in the gridlocked traffic of Dallas. I lay on the stretcher, feeling suspended between life and death. Every beat of my heart felt like the final knock on the door before it slammed shut forever. The pain wasn't just in my chest, it was everywhere. Every muscle felt like it was being strangled. My head pounded like it was splitting open, and my arms and legs felt as heavy as stone. I fought to stay conscious, to keep my mind alert, but my body had nothing left to give. One of the paramedics said gently, trying to reassure me, "Stay calm, we're almost there." But I knew deep down, none of them could guarantee I'd make it in time. I started to pray, not a formal prayer, but a desperate cry from the deepest part of my soul. "Lord, please don't let me die. Please don't let me go like this." I faintly heard someone say, "Let the doctors take care of you. You can pray later." But I could no longer hear clearly. Everything began to darken, not like falling asleep, but like being pulled into a pitch-black void. And that was the last moment I was conscious, before everything changed forever. I don't remember the exact moment I passed out. Everything just shut down, as if someone had unplugged the cord of life from me. But the next thing I knew, I was no longer in my body. I was floating near the ceiling, looking down at my own lifeless form, lying motionless on the stretcher. And in that instant, it hit me. I had died. The first feeling was overwhelming shock. There was no more pain, no more erratic heartbeat, no more shouting or machines around me, only absolute silence. Part of me felt strangely relieved, but the other part panicked, not knowing what was happening. I started to scream, not with my mouth, but with my mind. God, what's going on? I tried to stay near my body, to cling to the sight of it, hoping somehow I could return. But no matter how hard I tried, I was being pulled away. Not by hands, not by ropes, but by a powerful invisible force dragging me backward. My soul began sliding into a pitch-black void where no light could reach. That space wasn't like anything I had ever known. It wasn't a tunnel. It wasn't the night sky. It was absolute nothingness. A place without time, without gravity, without sound. I looked far ahead and saw a faint, distant light, gentle yet unreachable. But behind me was a deep, yawning chasm, like the open mouth of a beast, ready to swallow my soul whole. I didn't pass through a tunnel like others often describe. I saw no one waiting to greet me, no angels, no loved ones, no soft music, just me, alone, drifting through a black abyss like a lost child in a universe with no path home. And in that total isolation, something strange happened. I began to experience a life review but not just in pictures. It was all emotion. Each phase of my life came back to me, playing out like a slow motion film. But I didn't just watch. I felt the pain I'd caused others. I felt the disappointment of a friend I had betrayed. I felt the heartbreak of a former lover when I lied to her. I relived moments I once thought insignificant, only to realize they were deep wounds in someone else's heart. I don't know exactly when it began, but suddenly I realized I was no longer standing in that void. I was surrounded by a dim, ethereal light, like the universe itself had paused to begin playing back my life. There was no voice saying, "Look back," no angels or spirits to guide me, but I knew exactly what was coming. A trial with no judge, a screening with no audience, just me and the raw truth about who I really was. I saw myself as a child, innocent, sensitive, longing for love and acceptance. But that image only flashed by, like a gentle reminder. Right after that came the moments where I could have chosen kindness, but I chose selfishness. I saw myself yelling at my mother when all she wanted was to help me study. I saw the heavy eyes of my father when I left home for 3 days without a single word. I saw the sweat-earned money they gave me thrown into drugs, alcohol, and meaningless parties, like trophies, not the sacrifice of a loving family. Each image was a blade, not cutting my flesh, but slicing deep into my soul. No one accused me, but the gaze of myself, watching myself, was more unbearable than any condemnation. I saw the friend I abandoned right when they needed me most. I saw the ex-girlfriend crying alone because of the cruel words I had hurled at her in anger. I saw strangers I had mocked, disrespected, or pushed further into despair, just with silence or a look. The more I watched, the more I felt like my being was torn apart piece by piece, not by physical wounds, but by invisible gashes, ropes of shame pulling me backward toward the gaping darkness, wide as a shark's jaw, waiting to devour me. I felt myself drifting in reverse, not with my feet, but with the weight of every unconfessed sin I had ever carried. And I knew, if I was pulled just a little farther, I would never come back. It wasn't punishment, it was consequence, like an apple, falling from a branch, like water running downhill, and that black abyss behind me. It was the natural destination of a life without repentance. I tried to resist, I tried to scream, but in that realm no cry could be heard. And then, in the moment I was nearly consumed, I remembered the orthodox faith I had once worn like a badge but never truly lived. I began to whisper, not with my mouth, but from the very core of my soul, a prayer I hadn't spoken in decades. Lord, if you can still hear me, please save me. I know I've lived like a wretch. I know I don't deserve it, but if you give me one more chance, I promise I will live differently. I won't go back to that darkness again. But I was still suspended in that space between life and death, a place where time no longer seemed to follow any rules. Everything around me remained cloaked in endless darkness. Yet, within that darkness, I began to see visions, not vague or abstract, but clear, vivid, as though I had stepped into another reality. And then, one revelation froze me in terror. A devastating earthquake was going to strike Los Angeles. I saw myself standing in the heart of the city, a magnificent coastal metropolis bathed in sunlight, but in a blink, the light was replaced by a thunderous roar from deep within the earth. The ground shook violently. Skyscrapers, bridges, bustling streets, all began to crack open as if torn apart. I watched as people walking peacefully moments ago suddenly broke into screams, running, in panic, trying desperately to escape. Cars tumbled off freeways like toys flung by invisible hands. I saw clouds of dust, fires erupting, and cries for help rising from the ruins. A child trapped beneath a collapsed roof, a mother cradling the lifeless body of her child, wailing. And amidst the devastation, a middle-aged man fell to his knees, clutching a torn Bible, whispering his final prayers. I didn't just witness what was happening in the present, I was shown the future. A map of Los Angeles appeared before me, but it was no longer the same. Landmarks I had known all my life had vanished. Entire neighborhoods, Santa Monica, Venice, Beach, West Hollywood, were gone, wiped out as if they had never existed. The layout of the city had been drastically reshaped, and then, in the middle of the vision, a phrase emerged like writing etched in the air, "End of next year." Instantly, I felt it deep within my spirit. Millions of lives would be lost. and the destruction would be so severe that the city might take decades to recover, if it ever could. I thought that horrifying vision would be the end, but it wasn't. Suddenly, I was shown another place, Myanmar. I didn't understand why I was seeing it, but I recognized the landscape: golden pagodas, dust-covered roads, and densely packed neighborhoods. And then, another earthquake struck, this time without any warning. I saw ancient temples crumbling to the ground, Buddha statues split in half, and the air filled with the cries of terrified people. These were people already burdened by poverty, and now they had no protection, no aid, and no hope. I saw an old man holding a little girl, sitting helplessly outside what used to be their home, now a pile of rubble. No rescue came. The rivers turned a murky red, not from blood, but from mud and debris stirred up by the devastation. And then came the most haunting sight. The survivors, mostly children, wandering aimlessly, their faces blank, their eyes hollow, like shadows of the living, with no shelter, no guidance, and nowhere left to go. But just like what I had seen in Los Angeles, there was still a flicker of hope in Myanmar. Amidst the rubble, the cries, and the silence of loss, I witnessed something unexpected. Groups of people kneeling in prayer. In their deepest desperation, they turned to the one they had forgotten for so long. There were no church buildings, no grand rituals, just raw, broken souls reaching up toward heaven with trembling hands and tearful hearts. And then I saw it, a soft, faint light glowing in the midst of the devastation. It didn't come from any candle or generator. It wasn't man-made. This light was something else. It came from within them, from their faith, their surrender. It shimmered in places where there should have only been darkness, a supernatural glow that defied logic. I was still there, suspended in that space between life and death, neither fully gone nor yet returned. And in that realm, you don't question what you see. You know, what I witnessed wasn't some hallucination or dream. It was truth, or rather, a truth that hasn't yet arrived, but will. I couldn't understand why someone like me, a man with a messed up past, a heart full of regrets, and a life far from holy, was chosen to see this. But I didn't need to understand everything to grasp this one reality. When God shows you the future, it's not for you to keep it to yourself. At that moment, all I wanted was to scream, to warn, to shake the world awake. We've spent too many years numb and distracted, thinking we'll change someday. But someday never comes until it's too late. In that near-death place, I heard a voice, not through my ears, but deep in my soul. Tell them what you saw, for warning is the final mercy. I didn't know if I would return to the living, but if I did, I vowed not to keep this to myself. Because if Los Angeles and Mayan were to fall, and no one was warned, the guilt would be mine if I had seen and stayed silent. And so I kept praying. No eloquence, just a desperate cry from a soul torn apart with nothing left to lose, nothing left to hide. And then, something miraculous happened. In the midst of that hopeless darkness, a tiny light appeared, so small it could have been missed if I hadn't looked with my heart. It wasn't blinding, it wasn't majestic, it didn't roar like thunder, it was simply a point of light. And as I looked at it, I knew this was hope. Not a hope I created, but one given to me by a being not bound by time, not imprisoned by sin, and not distant from the lost like me. With that light came another force, not forceful, not demanding, just gentle, yet unwavering. It didn't pull me forward, it held me back, from falling into the abyss behind me. And the most important thing was this: it made me feel I wasn't alone. I still didn't know if I would live or die. I didn't know if I would be forgiven, but one thing I was certain of: from that moment on, if I lived, I would never live the same again. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more calling wrong right or darkness light. If I had one more chance, I would live truthfully and live with gratitude that in the deepest pit of despair, I called out, and he heard me. The very moment I whispered my final prayer into the endless darkness, I still recognized myself. I was still me, a terrified, fragile soul, full of regret, but still conscious. And then, as if that prayer had opened a sacred gate, an invisible force pulled me back. I was yanked, as if falling freely from the top of a 20-story building, crashing violently through layers of unseen realms. And suddenly, I woke up in my body, overwhelmed by a searing pain, as if every nerve in my body had been jolted at once. I later learned that was the exact moment they were defibrillating me. Coming back to the body was far from gentle. It felt like being slammed back to life with a sledgehammer, every cell aching, my chest feeling like it would explode, my eyes too heavy to open. But strangely, in the middle of that agony, I sensed something entirely different. It was as if my soul had been purified, cleaner, clearer, like a veil had been lifted. I was no longer the same man. Everything inside me had changed, from the way I saw the world, to small things like taste, music, how I felt the weather, or listened to others. I was dead for only 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but in that time, I had lived an entire lifetime. And when I woke up, I carried something I couldn't explain, as though I'd been granted a second chance no one expected. The doctors were stunned. I didn't just survive septic shock, cardiac arrest, and a coma. I walked out of the hospital a month later, healthy, with no trace of a heart attack on the EKG, not a single sign of damage. They called it a miracle. I knew it was divine intervention. I stepped out of the hospital like a stranger in my own body. Every day after that, I felt like a child learning how to live again. I had once been a man who cared only about money, regardless of morality or anyone's feelings. I used words to manipulate, benefits to control. I destroyed relationships, exploited trust, and lived with a heart that didn't know remorse. But now, I couldn't turn a blind eye to someone else's pain. I couldn't pretend not to see. I couldn't stay indifferent. Something deep in my heart kept urging me, live rightly, live meaningfully. I'm still learning how to live as this new version of myself. Sometimes the ghosts of my past return, selfishness, lust, greed. But now, I recognize them, and I choose not to let them own me anymore. I pray, I fast, I read the Bible, I serve. Every day, I remember that moment when I was pulled from the edge of the abyss, and I know, if the Creator gave me this second chance, then this life no longer belongs to me alone. And if you're reading these words, know that He can do the same for you. No one is too far gone to be saved. No one is too late to be made new, because grace is not for the perfect. It's for those brave enough to ask for a new beginning, like I did. When I came back from the brink of death, it wasn't just my body that recovered. My entire nature was shaken to its core. The bad habits, selfish thoughts, and blind desires that once controlled me all began to crack and fall away, like dry crust peeling off a soul being reborn. I used to be the kind of person who hurt others, all in an attempt to feed my fragile ego and satisfy my need for control. My life revolved around chasing money, manipulating relationships, and treating people's emotions like pieces in a game. But everything shifted after a near-death experience. It wasn't a forced change. It came from deep within, like a new seed had been planted in my soul. I began to truly feel the pain of others. Seeing someone's sadness stirred something in me, as if I was carrying a part of their sorrow in my own heart. My heart softened. It wasn't hardened or cold anymore. I no longer felt the drive to compete or dominate. Instead, I just wanted to love, to help, and to heal. I remember one moment vividly. I saw a homeless man shivering in the rain. The old me would have walked right past him without a second thought. But this time, I couldn't ignore him. I sat beside him, handed him my coat, and felt my hands tremble. Not from the cold, but because I saw myself reflected in his weary eyes. I knew then that I was no longer the person I used to be. Before, I called myself an Orthodox Christian, but it was just a label. I went to church a few times a year, said prayers out of routine, and never truly understood who I was addressing. My faith was empty, a meaningless shell. I lived in complete contradiction to what I claimed to believe. But after that pivotal experience, I began to rediscover my faith, not to appear virtuous, but because I could feel that someone was genuinely listening, holding my hand, and waiting for me to return. I didn't see Jesus with my eyes or hear Him with my ears, but I felt His presence more clearly than anything I'd ever known. It was like sensing a radiant, boundless, yet gentle energy, full of majesty, as if all life flowed from and returned to this source. To me, that is God, the one who holds the universe together with an invisible, divine thread. I believe that, no matter what someone's religion is, if they live with genuine kindness, love, and heartfelt prayer, they're reaching for that same divine presence. After this experience, strange things started happening to me. At first, I brushed them off as coincidences, but I began to sense things before they happened. For example, I had dreams of acquaintances saying goodbye, only to hear of their passing days later. But what truly shook me was the vision I had of an earthquake. It left me deeply unsettled. I witnessed buildings crumble, the ground tearing apart like a dragon's maw, and the cries of millions engulfed in despair. The sound of that devastation still lingers in my soul. I fell to my knees, not from fear of dying, but from the realization that if humanity doesn't change its path, such catastrophes will keep coming. That's why I'm reaching out to you, urging you to change. Love one another, treat people the way you want to be treated, and don't wait until you're staring death in the face to understand the true worth of life. Start small. Forgive those who've wronged you. Share a smile with a stranger. Spend time with your parents. Lend a hand to someone who feels like they're falling apart. These seemingly little acts are our greatest weapons against the darkness. I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm still on my own journey, fighting the shadows of my past and the parts of myself that try to pull me back. But what has changed is that I no longer face those battles alone. God walks with me now. There's light in my heart and a purpose driving me forward. My mission is to share my story so the world remembers that grace exists, that forgiveness is real, and that transformation is always possible, no matter how far you've fallen. If someone like me, who once lived in complete darkness, can find change, then so can you. And if we each commit to change, we can transform the world together. This isn't just my story. It's a journey of renewal. It's about moving from a hardened, broken existence to a heart that knows love again, from being lost to living with a mission to awaken others. I wasn't given a second chance at life just to survive, but to live with purpose, with gratitude, and with light. This is a reminder that it's never too late to start over. Let it awaken the part of you that's waiting to come to life again. If this story stirs something deep inside you, leave a comment below, because every thought you share brings us closer to the truth. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Eternal Bible Stories, so this message can continue reaching others who are still searching for hope. Remember, God is always with you,